Welcome, everyone, to the sixth round post fight show. I'm Mookie Alexander, joined by Eddie Mercado, and we are here to recap what happened at Bellator 222 at Madison Square Garden in New York City. Before we get to the fight, how's it going, Eddie?
It's going well. I had high hopes going into this, and the card delivered. So I am one happy camper. Outside of getting a couple picks wrong, I, I'm pretty stoked, and I feel like there's a lot of meat on this bone. We got a lot. There's a lot of takeaways, and I feel like that's kind of rare, unfortunately, for a Bellator card. Yet here we are with a bunch to talk about.
Yeah, even the title fights might not have been scintillating, and in fact, they took us over the 3 hour time slot for the main card. But there are still some intriguing storylines out of those fights, and then the finishes that we did get, both on the main card and then a notable one on the prelims. Those were very notable for their each unique ways. I guess the only exception would be Dylan Dennis, but that's for the post fight interview, and we'll get to that shortly. So let's kick things off. Let's not waste any time here. Rory MacDonald, just 2 months ago, he was talking in a way that you would think he shouldn't be fighting again or he might retire. Well, he ends up getting the win over Neiman Gracie in the welterweight tournament semifinals. He also defends his title in the process. Unanimous decision win. The scorecards read 49-46, 48-47, and 48-47. Again, not going to light the world on fire, but Rory did enough to get the job done. Gracie had a couple of submission attempts that Rory had to fend off, including that deep knee bar in the second round. But just in general, it felt like Rory was in control of things. He didn't have a ton of offense, but he certainly had more than Neiman, and that was enough to really justify giving him the victory.
Yeah, and he was pretty comfortable on the ground.
Yeah,
like you said, there was that one knee bar and a brief armbar attempt, but outside of that, he was pretty much defensively sound. He minded his P's and Q's, and he did a great job of solidifying the top position when he did have it. So I thought it was cool to see just how elite Rory is on the ground. I mean, we all know it, but it's nice to see him, tangle with a Gracie in an MMA setting where you can punch each other in the face, you can elbow each other, because he sprinkled in some pretty nice ground strikes throughout. It wasn't like this crazy downpour of these brutal strikes, but he snuck in some good shots here and there, enough to stay busy, enough to stay active, enough to give Gracie something to think about, so he's not just spamming submission attempts, making him close the guard up. It was a really strong performance from Rory.
More workmanlike, I guess you could say. It's the type of performance, when coupled with the Fitch fight, that you would have to favor Douglas Lima to beat Rory in their rematch whenever that fight is going to happen. I think I've seen some rumblings like October, November, something like that. But it's going to be later on this year. Rory did beat Lima the first time around. That was a grueling, very, very good fight, back and forth. But yeah, the way Lima's looked lately and the way Rory has fought, not necessarily just the Gracie and Fitch fights, but the fights since the Lima fight. So you add in the Mousasi one too. Lima seems to be hitting his peak form, whereas Rory is kind of just he's not the Canadian psycho as we knew him way back at the height of his UFC career.
No, it seems like he's found peace. It seems like he's one with the world now, and he's all about the love.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to enjoy those types of fights for like the main event. But Gracie he acquitted himself okay in certain spades. Like he definitely gave Rory problems with those leg kicks early on. I think that's what set up the first takedown of the fight that he completed, and then the subsequent knee bar. But Rory, I think he's just too big and too strong, and that definitely played a role. And Rory is still, to me, a top 10 guy. And Gracie wasn't particularly close to winning the fight, but he wasn't like the typical helpless fighter where, okay, my grappling isn't working early and I'm just going to gas out and just fade out of the fight.
Right. Yeah, he was definitely in it. And this was a huge step up, going from Ed Ruth to Rory MacDonald.
Exactly.
He did extremely well, considering. Like I was impressed. He did way better. Like I was gunning for the upset. I wanted to see it. But I think he did extremely well and showed he's got more than just a flopping jiu-jitsu game to rely on. So I think it was his stock went up a little bit, you know, and he didn't get finished, so that's also definitely a good thing.
Yeah, it's also easy to forget that Rory MacDonald has never been submitted, and the most comparable fight we have for him is the Damian Maia fight. That was admittedly 5 years ago, but Maia had him in full mount in round one. Roy was in deep trouble. He got out of that, and he ended up controlling the rest of that fight. So Roy is a damn good grappler, and he's a pretty good wrestler overall. So this was always going to be a tough matchup for Gracie, and he did what he could. He's just not quite at that level. And even if Rory isn't in his prime anymore, he's still what we found out on Friday night, good enough to beat the Neiman Gracies of the world.
Yeah, I mean, athletically, he's still better, and technique-wise, he's on par. So, yeah, he still has enough to get past Gracie. But, yeah, like you were saying, favoring him in a rematch with Lima, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it could still be a styles make fights thing where, Fitch is very much a specialist at this point. He's going to wrestle and to wrestle you heavily and shoot for takedowns and make things as ugly as possible. And then we know what Neiman Gracie excels at. So Lima, though, he is kind of, we know him for his striking, but he is so well-rounded, much in the way that MacDonald is. But Lima at this point is the more violent fighter, I guess you could say. And we saw that what he did to Michael Page, even though it was, expected that he was going to beat Page, that was even more, vicious than I had anticipated.
Yeah. Did you see that edit with someone edited Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, into Lima's hand? Oh my goodness, that was so good. Yeah. That was incredible.
It was. So the only concern I have is with this final is if MacDonald does get put into some troublesome spots, and I pretty much remember from the first fight, Lima was busting up Rory's legs. If this happens again, given MacDonald's mindset from a couple months ago, I don't think it was necessarily wiped out just because of this win over Gracie, although he did seem in higher spirits in the post-fight interview. Is Rory going to be able to fight through that adversity as we've seen him fight, or at least try to fight through in years past?
Yeah. I don't know. Lima he's a bad dude, and I don't think he's undefeated in rematches, I believe, also.
Yeah, I would probably have to check that. I could check that later on. But the main event, you see Roy getting the win over Gracie. That was one of just two fights to go to a decision on the main card. The other one was the other title fight, but we'll talk about Caldwell and Horiguchi a little later on. Now we get to the co-main event, Lyoto Machida. Wow, that was some the vintage dragon there. He sent Chael Sonnen into retirement with a second-round TKO. I could not believe Chael survived that first flying knee. I thought he was totally gone, but he couldn't survive the second one. That was another good shot by Lyoto, and the ground and pound was just too much to handle. Really, other than Sonnen getting one trip, and I think he briefly had Lyoto's back, it was pretty much all Machida from start to finish. Those body kicks were brutal. All the strikes, the counter shots, Sonnen really didn't have any answers. So it seemed like the right time for Chael to retire because he has been taking some beatings over the last few years. And while Machida looked very good, and who knows, he might even get a title shot against Ryan Bader at light heavyweight, Chael hanging up the gloves, not much of a shock to me.
No, not a shocker, and good for him because, he's been at the top for a very long time. And if you look at the list of people that he's fought, you're going to be insanely impressed. Even if he lost a lot of those, it's still pretty cool that he had that mindset that he wanted to go out and find the best of the best and compete against them. Like, if you look at his record, like, you have to go pretty far back to find someone who's not a name. Like, you have to go really, like, extremely far back. Like Brian Baker in 2008.
Yeah, like, probably.
That's insane. That's 11 years of, like, top-tier opponents. That's ridiculous. Even if I think he had a year off somewhere in there.
Yeah, that year off probably had to do with the drug test failure after he lost to Anderson Silva.
But, like, one of the best talkers in the game. a pioneer. You know, he's who sells a fight outside of McGregor? Like, who sells a fight better than Chael Sonnen?
Well, it is a very good point to bring up, is that, you know, at the height of his career, Chael still was just not able to get himself into becoming a champion. Even if he had beaten Silva in that first fight, it would have been taken away because of the drug test failure. But that little point aside, he became Anderson Silva's first foil. Like that playing that villainous role worked so well for him. It helped Silva become a pay-per-view draw towards the last few title defenses that he had. And Chael ended up having significant staying power from pretty much the Marquardt fight onward. And whether you found his act obnoxious or you found it endearing and entertaining, it certainly worked. And he got himself into big fights as a result, including the John Jones fight, because let's be real, on merit, he shouldn't have gotten a title shot at light heavyweight against John Jones after just losing to Anderson Silva. But that ended up being one of John's better selling pay-per-views before this stretch of the Gustafsson fights and the two Cormier bouts.
Yeah, I mean, that's the gift of gab got him the title fight, and that's pretty badass if you ask me. You know, he really did pave the way. I mean, we see it now. Like, so many guys are almost, you know, not even almost. It's to the point where it's forced and it's fake, and these guys are trying to be someone other than themselves by trying to sell a fight the way Chael does it, the way that Conor does it. You know, he's a lot of people imitate Chael Sonnen. I mean, down to his fighting style. Like, he's a guy who always came out, got in your face. And even he did the same thing to Machida tonight. Like, he came out, he pressured, put Machida's back to the fence, tried to get the takedown. But, like, you know, he's just he's at the end of the rope. So that's it for old Chael. And man, he said some funny shit in his day. I'll say that. He has said some funny things, and he'll be missed. You know, people don't sell the fights the way Chael Sonnen does. So he'll definitely be missed, but he'll still be around in his own capacity.
Yeah, he's going to be part of the Bellator studio panel, and he's got Ariel and the Bad Guy on ESPN Plus. So he's going to be a part of the MMA webosphere and you know, just broadcast in general for the long term. Of course, he did retire before with the other drug test failure a few years back, but this time I think it's going to be permanent. He's 42 years old. This is his second straight knockout loss, and he had been dropped in the win against Vanderlei. So, you know, that stuff piles up. He had his kids there, and his son was seen in tears, seeing his dad get stopped, and that's always a tough scene. So definitely wishing the best in retirement. And you know what is amazing? He's retiring, but Fedor, who stopped him, 8-9 months ago, apparently just signed a multi-fight deal with Bellator. So he's going to keep on continuing his career. Apparently, Scott Coker says it's going to be, you know, take him through the end of his career. And my first reaction is, why?
My first reaction is, what's up with these pride guys and the longevity? You know what I mean? Like, your Shoguns, you got your Fedors, you know, Alistair Overeem still floating around. Like, what's up with the longevity that comes out of these pride fighters is ridiculous. Like, they really are outlasting a lot of these other guys.
It's like a cockroach. It's just really hard to kill off. Pride never die, indeed. But
it's insane.
It's just, after seeing Fedor get crop dusted by Bader in a half minute, can they please just give Fedor some easy fights to round out his career? Because at which point, if you give him any notable competition who can punch, he's probably going to lose.
Think about what you just said, though. Can we give Fedor easy fights to round out his career? When, like, that's exactly what he's been getting. Jeff Munson, Ishii, Pedro Hizzo, Jadapeep Singh, Fabio Maldonado, like Matt Mitrione, Frank Mir, Chael Sonnen. Like, that's exactly what he's been getting outside of Ryan Bader. So...
And even the Maldonado fight, he just about got knocked out. So even the quote-unquote easier fights for him have not been easy. And he got knocked out by Mitrione.
Frank Mir dropped him, too.
Yeah, I can't remember if he hurt him and dropped him or just buzzed him. But either way, Mir is at this point also very, very washed up. So I don't know what Bellator's plans are for Fedor, but I guess we can rule out a rematch with Chael.
There's a couple fights that make sense, like Haratonov. There's a fight.
Yeah, and they just announced that Mitrione's going to rematch Haritonov in August, but I guess that's on the table if Haritonov does beat. Really, whether he wins or loses, that's an option.
Right. Yep.
Yep.
And I mean, they could probably even run back Mitrione since it was a double knockdown.
Yeah, that is true. So we're talking about Fedor here because really Machida dominated Sonnen. What is next for Lyoto before we move on quickly? Do you think he's beaten Rafael Carvalho at middleweight? Now he moves up to 205. He beats Chael Sonnen. Are you thinking he's going to get a title shot in one of those two divisions next? I mean, he's still got something left in the tank.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should do him versus Ryan Bader too. Like, why not? Bader got knocked out. I think they should run that one back. Like, why not?
I think so. I'm not against it. I think Boussassi probably beats Machida in a rematch, but against Bader, Bader, I think, has got his heavyweight title defense coming in against Czech Congo. But after that, Machida is still a difficult style matchup for Ryan Bader.
Yeah, but Bader's gotten so much better.
Yes,
and he hasn't slowed down quite the same way that Machida has, and his style doesn't suffer as much as Machida's style suffers from that deterioration.
Yeah, that is true. All right, so those are the main and co-main events all recapped for you. Now we get to the fight that everybody is wanting us to talk about, Dillon Danis. He overcame the Drake curse, the Eminem curse, to submit plus 1,000 underdog Max Humphrey by armbar in about 4.5 minutes. Really, that fight was not supposed to be competitive on paper. It wasn't, when they actually got into the cage. I am amused that Big John McCarthy in the post-fight interview actually said to Dillon, your stand-up looked a lot more fluid. Like, the fight took place on the ground for all but like 20 seconds. What are you even talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. Big John was off all night. I feel like I don't think he was hitting the mark. But Danis did his thing. I mean, he tried to get a TKO. Like, he really wanted it, and he did his best to pound out Humphrey, but Humphrey was tough and refused to quit. And Danis was like, shit, time's running out. Like, this dude's about to get out of the first round. I can't let that happen. And went ahead and got the armbar, which was slick and it was nice. But honestly, like, throw him in there against Neiman Gracie. Like, he talks so much. Like, he's saying he's ready for John Jones and Rory McDonald. Let him fight Neiman Gracie, because that fight is really exciting for me. I would love to see that.
Yeah, at this point, what Bellator is probably going to do with Danis is just give him more guys like Max Humphrey to just build up his record and have him as more than just the guy who is training partners with Conor McGregor. Right. I'm just glad I didn't bring him up all that much when talking about the fight. But Danis was certainly not shy to call out Rory McDonald and John Jones for some reason, but he proclaims to be the best in the world. And if that's going to be the case, yeah, we might as well give you Neiman Gracie. Yeah,
why not? If he's legit thinking he's that good and wants to take a step up, like, what better step up,
Yeah.
Unless it's going to end, man, as long as they grapple. Like, I don't want it to be like Neiman Gracie just kicking the leg of Danis for 15 minutes.
You damn well know that is the risk that you take when you get two grapplers in there.
But I'm glad Danis is in Bellator, and I'm glad he's in MMA, because, people are going to be tuning in. They're going to want to see him get knocked out.
Yeah, I think Bellator knows what they plan to do with Danis, so certainly he should be fighting guys who are better than Max Humphrey. I imagine that we're not going to see Humphrey in the Bellator cage much longer. He's going to be in the same realm as the two opponents Jake Hager's already fought.
Yep, back to the meat packing plant.
Yep. Now, moving on to the bantamweight division. Man, Patrick Mix. Mauro Ranallo said it. He might be in the mix already. He he turned a takedown attempt into a slick back take, and he got a body triangle locked in so quickly, and then he gets the rear naked choke finish of Ricky Bandejas in just 66 seconds. Patrick Mix, a prospect out of the Jackson Wink camp, he's a submission specialist, and boy, I want to see more of this guy. He is young, he's exciting, and he's crafty. And Bandejas is a pretty good veteran, and he's been, hanging around Bellator's bantamweight division for a bit. And I was just amazed at the back take more than anything else.
Yeah, well, this was his second fight at bantamweight for Bandejas. Or no, you know what? It was his third. I thought he fought featherweight, but actually when he fought Gallagher, that was at bantamweight also. But yeah, this was crazy. I didn't expect this. I thought it was going to be competitive throughout. I thought it was going to be a war, but man, Bandejas got caught slipping. Like, the aggressiveness of Mix was impressive, and it seemed to be just overwhelming. And I don't know, Bandejas he seemed like he didn't know what to do. Because he got his back taken while standing, so it was like, do I try to get him off of me? Do I protect the choke? Do I drop down? Like, what do I do? And by the time he decided to drop down, he was already tapping. So this was an explosive win for Mix. And yeah, it does put him right in the mix. It does put him right there. Because, Bandejas went the distance with Archuleta. Archuleta just announced himself as the number one contender in 3 divisions, apparently. Self-proclaimed, of course. So, yeah, I guess Mix is right there.
Yeah, it's not like Bellator's bantamweight division is just, and we've talked about this in previous 6 rounds, it's not like they're just stacked with all these lists of daunting potential title contenders. There's a reason why they're doing a featherweight tournament and not a bantamweight one. They've got a lot more talent a weight class up than at 135. And a little fun fact here, Bandejas and Mix were actually supposed to fight each other at Ring of Combat 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago to the day. So they finally do meet up, and I think Bandejas was a slight favorite, and Mix just ran through him.
Yeah, that was crazy. I didn't see it coming.
Nope, not at all. So Patrick Mix, keep an eye on him. And you brought up Juan Archuleta, and of course Archuleta beat Ricky Bandejas by decision. He knocked out Eduardo Dantas. That was a sensational finish. And you know what? He had Dantas badly hurt with a left hook earlier in that round, and I think he jarred him with an uppercut as well. But that right hand, that is a right hand from hell. Archuleta's got 18 straight wins. Dantas is not an easy guy to just completely bulldoze like that. And I know this fight was at featherweight, but because of the short notice nature of the bout, these are basically bantamweights who are just cutting, not cutting as much weight. So Archuleta also cut a pretty good promo, wanting that title shot against Horiguchi. So it's not exactly, I think you can't necessarily deny him that shot. He's been on a winning streak. He's beaten good competition. He just knocked out a former champion in brutal fashion.
Yeah, I mean, who else? Like you were saying, how the division's so shallow. There's really no one else making that kind of noise. So yeah, I think he's proven himself. To be quite honest, he looked really, really good out there. Like he right away. You could tell he was so much faster than Dantas, and speed kills. So it's a tough break for Dantas, but man, Archuleta, he was really borderline cringy in the post-fight speech. Like he was right there, like teetering. Like, is this? Do I feel cringy watching this? But I think he kind of kept it together. Will he get that title shot? I don't know what Horiguchi's doing. Like, I don't know if he's going to compete in Rizin next, since he's their champion also. So I don't know. I'd like to see it. This was a badass knockout, and it was a sweet counter. Like, Dantas was coming forward, pressuring. He threw a kick, and Archuleta just checked the kick and then just wound up and just really brought this haymaker from his hip. And what a gentleman, too, because he just put his hands up in celebration instead of following up with some unnecessary punishment. So the walk-off knockout is such a gentlemanly thing and a badass thing to do. So I guess I'm officially sold on Archuleta. I was a little on the fence about him. I picked Dantas going in. He kind of had a lot to prove to me, and Jesus, he did. I'm sold. I'm sold on Archuleta. Will he win a title? Is he better than Horiguchi? No. But will he compete for it? Sure.
Yeah, what they are apparently going to do now that Horiguchi has got both belts is that he can defend both. So I think it's in his contract. He's got to at least defend that belt once a year. So logically speaking, he should be able to defend that title, the Bellator title, within these next 6 months or so. So, it's feasible for Archuleta to get that next crack. It's not like there are again, not a ton of options out there. And just the highlight reel, that's one of the best finishes of the night. I'm glad that Eduardo Dantas was able to get up eventually and exit the cage under his own power, because it was a little scary when he was staying down for a while and they were ready to bring the stretcher in.
Yeah, that's never good when you see guys down for that long. And Dantas is someone we've been watching for a very long time. He's a two-time champion. He's been at the top forever. He's one of Bellator's mainstays. So yeah, seeing him down for that long was a little scary, and definitely did not want to see him get stretchered out of there. That's for sure.
Yeah, certainly one of their most underrated fighters that's been with the organization for such a long time. And look, the other 2 times he's been knocked out, the Michael McDonald fight last year, and it's a combination of knocked out and ankle breaker. And then we all remember, for at least the hardcores, the shock factor of when he was stopped by Tyson Nam way back in 2012, and that sprung Tyson Nam into World Series of Fighting. And it turns out that was just a monstrous upset. Nam never really panned out in WSOF. But yeah, this is a tough spot for Dantas. He's now lost 3 of 4. And he might be 30 years old, but it kind of feels like he's an old 30. I mean, he's been around a long time.
Yeah, high mileage, that's for sure. But he's been active, and he's been in some wars. Man, him and Joe Warren went back and forth, and it's like they weren't like these striking wars necessarily, but like they were still grueling, just real grueling, just back and forth wars. And yeah, man, just it's the fight game. Your age really isn't indicative of your wear, Like you could be old and still in it, or you could be young and have just a ton of just wear and tear on your body, and you just kind of become a shell. And I hope that's not the case for him. But
yeah, I hope not either. But man, there's something about Nova União fighters that when they fall off that cliff, it just looks ugly. Like look at Renan Barão.
That's like the worst case scenario there. Mm-hmm. But then you got Jose Aldo though, who just when you think he's done, he's right back.
Yeah, like the Volkanovski fight for him, it doesn't look like he's like totally washed out. It's just, a not good performance. And at least, right. He's not, the losses to Holloway, there's no shame in that. But the Dantas knockout tonight and just Barão's recent performances, that's kind of the thing we've seen for that camp in particular, especially goes hand in hand with some of the bad weight cuts they've had over the years.
Yeah. And like, you can't even blame the weight cut here.
Nope. Not at all, because this is the featherweight fight. So Archuleta getting the big W, and he called out Kyoji Horiguchi. Well, Horiguchi, of course, making history by becoming a simultaneous 2 promotion champion. He defended his Rizin title by choking out Darrion Caldwell back in December, and now he takes the Bellator title away from Caldwell with a unanimous decision win. I think the scorecards were 49-46, 48-47, 48-47. I'll check it again, but I had no issue with giving Horiguchi the win. It was not a good fight, let's be honest. It was the worst fight on the entire card, and Caldwell is largely responsible for that, because let's call it what it is. It was a lay and pray performance for several rounds, and he was just not even attempting it's like he wasn't even close to even thinking about throwing a strike on the ground. He was all about control, positioning, just staying on top and riding out the rest of the round. He got stood up a couple of times, one of which involved grabbing the glove of Horiguchi, and that was in round 1, which was Darrion's best round. But Horiguchi might not have been a whirlwind of offense, at least especially not compared to what we were used to seeing out of him, but he was just doing more. And with this scoring system that we see now, judges are going to reward doing more damage and having more effective offense on a round-by-round basis than just controlling someone.
Oh yeah. So if this were 2001, then Caldwell would have taken that decision. But the sport has evolved from there. Like the judges are way more educated. It's not just the guy on top, the guy holding the guy down is winning. It doesn't work that way. Like if you're holding someone down, but they're elbowing you and like constantly just punching you, even if they're not like devastating strikes, like what would you rather? Who would you rather be out there? Would you rather be getting a really, really tight hug, or would you rather be eating these little elbows and punches? Because I'd rather get hugged, to be quite honest with you. So I have no issues with Horiguchi getting the dub, and I think it's cool as shit that he's a champ in the sense of he's a true world champion, like a true world champion. Like he's won belts in different parts of the world, and that's gangster shit. Like that's who can say that?
Exactly. And, credit's got to go to Bellator, of course, and Rizin for playing nice. And we tend not to see this type of co-promotion in MMA. And it provides us an opportunity to see, okay, how does this fight play out in the cage versus in the ring? How does it play out in a different environment? And just to correct something, 2 judges gave it 49-46, not 1 judge. I think Doug Crosby was one of them. He gave 49-46. So I guess I got to lay off on him and his scorecards for a while. But yeah,
credit to John McCarthy. I was ragging on him earlier, but credit to him on calling this fight. He was calling it correctly. He was acknowledging that although Caldwell did have the takedowns and was controlling and was on top, it was Horiguchi. He was the busier fighter and landing the more strikes, and damage is the name of the game, not control. So
exactly. And you know what? Caldwell, I don't know how much longer he's going to stay at 135. He looked 2 weight classes bigger than Horiguchi, who of course is a former flyweight. But still, he gassed again. He was looking tired in round 3, and that was Horiguchi's best round by far. Caldwell found like the faintest of second wins, but that's a problem for him. I mean, he's gotten caught a couple of times with guillotines in the 3rd round, and Horiguchi threatened that, I think, in the 3rd round or the 4th round of this fight. So as much as I like Caldwell as a fighter, this is certainly not an endearing performance whatsoever, especially since this is a pretty big show, and this is a big chance to even the score, and he just turned in a dud.
Yeah, and I think another thing is that his striking isn't really coming along that well. Like he's not like he had some really nice knees in there, but when he's on the outside and like kind of just fainting in with this like half-hearted kick, it's just like it's not elite, It's just not world class. Horiguchi's world class everywhere, just everywhere. Caldwell's a world-class grappler, world-class wrestler. His grappling is damn good, but there's definitely holes, but way more holes in his stand-up. So he's just not as complete of a fighter as Horiguchi. He's just super athletic and a specialist when it comes to strictly wrestling. But like you can't do that anymore in MMA. Like it's not enough. You have to have some volume behind it. Like Rory was doing in the main event. Like when he had top position, he was throwing strikes also. So it makes it less debatable. So if you're not out there striking, and you're not getting near submissions, you can't be confident in winning a fight.
Yep, I think a good point of reference when it comes to Caldwell, look at Aljamain Sterling. Now, Aljamain doesn't have Darian's wrestling credentials, but look how much better Sterling striking has gotten over the last couple of years, such that he was able to outstrike Pedro Munoz and outstrike Jimmy Rivera, such that he's close to he's probably going to get the next title shot at bantamweight. And I remember when Sterling was a free agent a few years ago that I don't think Bellator was interested at the time, but if they were and they had signed him, and you match Sterling up against Caldwell now, it's Sterling all the way.
Oh, Caldwell will get pieced up on the feet.
Yeah.
And he would probably get submitted with the guillotine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because of course Aljamain's the human transport. He could also rear naked choke him too, and the volume would wear Caldwell out fast.
Yeah, Sterling's really he's continuously evolving. I'm not so sure Caldwell is.
Yep. there is still time. He is, but he's not. It's horribly inexperienced. He's not 2 years into his career. He's 7 years into his career. He's 31 years old. So if he's going to make these changes, he's got to make them pretty soon, or else his career is going to stall out, because there are going to be some guys up at featherweight, if he does, say, move up there permanently, that are going to give him problems, especially if they can shut his takedowns, take his takedowns away.
Yeah, there's some dangerous strikers at featherweight.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
So Horiguchi, good for him. What do you think about all this Bellator Rizin cross promotion stuff? Because Scott Coker, as we're recording this, he announced that Patricio Pitbull is going to enter Rizin's lightweight tournament, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yes.
It seems like there's like a trade going on, and the more we see out of that, I think the better it is for the sport as a whole.
I think it's great. I think it's what everybody wants to see. It's what the fans want to see. It was, for me, it was one of the greatest eras in the UFC was when they acquired Pride and they started bringing over Rampage and all these, like, they acquired Strikeforce and they just started. We got to see all these dream matchups that never were possible before. And then, it just kind of got saturated and diluted, and then that mystique kind of went away. But now it's kind of happening again. But with Bellator and Rizin, they're trading back and forth, which is awesome. I really credit Rizin because they seem to really think outside the box and trying to book these matches that just no one would ever think possible. Like getting Floyd Mayweather and Tenshin to box each other. Like that actually happened. Like that's insane. Like I love it. I absolutely love it. I love freak show fights. I love the spectacle side of it. And Bellator and Rizin are the two promotions who do that. So I think it's great. I hope it continues. And I hope it is contagious. And, I hope that other promotion out there catches on and starts doing something similar. Because that's what we all want to see. Who's the baddest on the planet?
Yep. And it comes at a time when, look, you got Horiguchi in Rizin and in Bellator. You've got Demetrius Johnson at one championship. You got Henry Cejudo right now in the UFC. In an ideal world, these promotions could work together. We could have some sort of round-robin tournament to see who's really the best among these three. And I know that DJ's fought Cejudo twice and DJ's fought Horiguchi. But I'd love to see Cejudo versus Horiguchi, for example. But I know that has not a snowball's chance in hell of happening.
Nope. Man, if only, though. If only.
Yeah, if only. But so Horiguchi gets the job done. And the fact that the crowd went from chanting USA, USA in round 3 to loudly cheering for Horiguchi, that tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, they also booed a lot, too.
Yep. Now, this fight was on the prelims, and this wasn't even the feature prelim. I thought Bellator could have fixed up this bout order a little bit differently. Maybe DAZN had a hand in it, but Adam Boric was getting out-wrestled. Really, it was on his way to being 2 rounds down against Aaron Pico, and Pico ends up getting knocked out with a flying knee. That's the second time in 3 fights that Boric has stopped somebody with that flying knee. And the concern for Pico is that he's only had 7 professional fights, and he's been touted as a couple of years ago with media writing him up as the best MMA prospect ever, and Bellator's Jay Glazer going, he could be the LeBron James of MMA. It is way, way, way too overblown. And the fact that he's been getting hurt badly through these 7 fights, knocked out twice and hurt before getting choked out by Zach Freeman in his debut, that has to be concerning.
Oh, man. This was tough. This was tough to see because I want him to do well. I want him to be great. I love greatness. I want to see greatness. But, he's kind of turning into a glass cannon, and that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. He took the escalator to the top. And he beating Leandro Higo, that's a big deal. That's a legit win. But, man, he fell really hard on that Henry Corrales loss. That was brutal. And then just to come out and get knocked out again 5 months later, flying knee, when you were doing well again, man, it's sad. It's downright sad.
And I think it's just a glass cannon kind of thing because he has all the technique and like has all the athleticism, but you can just hurt him. He's hurtable.
Yep. In fairness to him, that was a hell of a flying knee. It probably would have dropped anybody. But the fact that his chin is there to be hit in the grand scheme of things, he's 22 years old, and he's taken this much damage in 2 years worth of professional fighting. That damage is not going to magically erase itself. You can either take a shot or you can't.
Yeah, and it's definitely not going to get better. That's like one of the things you really can't do a lot to improve it. So, man, he's going to have guys come after him. It's crazy because he's so lethal, but it looks like he's also very killable. So it makes for a great action fighter. That's for damn sure. Like that's must-see TV. But you got to be concerned with someone who was supposed to be, like you were saying, the best prospect ever is now approaching a 500 record. It's I don't know, man. Where do you go from here?
Well, where he does go is he needs a serious step down in competition because Boric is no joke. He's undefeated himself. He's got his own amateur MMA background, and he's 13-0. Either 13-0 if you believe Tapology or 9-0 if you believe Sherdog. But either way, he's undefeated. He is a finisher. He's a damn good fighter. And he might have been losing up to that point, but he's still very dangerous. And Jimmy Smith made a great point on Twitter when the fight happened. He said, for all of the Aaron Pico needs a new camp people, he's had 7 fights with 3 major teams. When AKA, Body Shop, and Jackson Wink can't fix the issue, it isn't about the camp.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Oh, man. This is sad. He's 22 years old. He's so young. He needs time off.
Agreed.
That's what he really needs. He needs time off. Like, a lot. Like, at least a year. Like, these are very brutal knockouts in a relatively close, short amount of time. He needs some time off, man. Like, for his own health, at least. But I don't know. Maybe a sports psychologist is his thing. Because, like, it seems like everything's in place. Like, he's got the tools, the physicality. Yeah, I don't know, man. Maybe he's just a bust. Or maybe this is just like he's going to be the guy he's like, oh, yeah, well, there was that one prospect who got knocked out a bunch early in his career but then came back to be great. Maybe he's going to be that exception. I don't know. It's not looking good, though.
Yeah, it's still early, but it's pretty telling that this was finally the fight where he actually bothered to use his wrestling. Like Jackson Wink had to say, or Greg Jackson presumably told him, hey, you're really good at this wrestling thing. You're elite at it. Go take this dude down. But it became like a complete swing. He pretty much wanted no part of the stand-up. He was absolutely pushing for takedowns and control. And then the part, of course, that failed him is that he couldn't keep him there forever. And it just took one moment on the feet, and it's lights out.
Yeah, that's just really not good to be this chinny at 22.
Mm-hmm.
Like, chins only get worse.
Yep,
it's a brutal sport. It's just a rough sport. So I hope he takes some time off and figures his shit out. And if he wants to continue on competing, I'd love to watch him. I think he's a great talent. I think he's extremely dangerous. And, man. I don't feel good about this. I just don't.
No, I can understand why. Whoever was, whether it's him or his management or Bellator themselves, like whoever wanted to push him that far up the ladder, obviously it's just too much too soon. And the Higo fight might have been deceiving, in a way. So, yeah, I agree with you. He does need some time off. And, we've seen this happen with Bellator prospects over the years that they get heavily hyped up and then they suffer some shock outcomes that just dial it all down a bit. And, Pico wasn't the only fighter on the prelims that Bellator has tried pushing. But, for several reasons. Like Heather Hardy is not a big prospect whatsoever, but she looked pretty bad tonight. She got stopped by Taylor Turner. And then I guess the other notable fight, if you wanted to watch on your own time, but I didn't catch it live, Reina Kubota choked unconscious by Lindsey Van Zant. So Rizin didn't have a perfect night, but that was certainly a surprise outcome, apparently. So all in all, how do you?
There was
Go ahead.
2 other prelims tickled my fancy.
Yeah.
The Hobson Gracie submission. He caught that arm bar on Oscar Vera, and it looked like he actually hyperextended the elbow, so he might have broke the dude's arm. So that was pretty cool. Not that, the dude might have a broken arm, but just, to see a full-on arm bar, I thought was pretty damn cool. And then Phil Hawes, thought to be a prospect, actually returned to action tonight. Got a TKO win after nearly 2 years away from the sport. So good to see him, still around, still back at it. Jackson Wink guy. Him and Pico kind of have this same trajectory, but it looks like Hawes kind of went one way and Pico might be going the other. But we'll see. And maybe that's what Pico needs to do, is like the same thing that Hawes did. He took some really bad losses, but go take some time away and then come back and boom, fight someone, comparable, and then you're right back in it.
Well said. So Bellator 222 is in the books. How would you assess this card overall? I mean, we were in the midst of a pretty big run for Bellator with 220, exclusively on DAZN. Same for 221 and 222. This card was great. Like, it had everything. It had promotional debuts. It had prospects coming through. It had prospects coming up short. It had number 1 contenders establishing themselves. It had a retirement in Chael Sonnen, a legend retiring. It had a Gucci Gang champ that never happens, co-promotion. We got Rory McDonald defending his belt, advancing in the welterweight Grand Prix. Like, there was so much going on that, like, I love it. I was hyped going in. I'm hyped coming out. Can they do this again, I guess, is the real question, because this was great. Like, I feel great. I feel great about this Bellator card, and it's a good sign. Yeah, these last 2 Bellator cards, 221 and 222, the main event, I could take it or leave it, but the only fight I just thoroughly dislike was Horiguchi Caldwell, but I like the outcome of Horiguchi getting the title. So, it wasn't all that negative, and the finishes were cool, and you got some good results in the prelims. So, all in all, I had a good night watching these fights. It's a nice way to spend a Friday evening. And obviously, Bellator's got more lined up with Gegard Mousasi and Rafael Lovato Jr. I think that got rescheduled from earlier this year to now, but that's for the middleweight title. And you got Paul Daly versus Eric Silva, which, as long as Paul Daly doesn't feel the need to become a wrestler again, that should be a pretty fun fight.
Yeah, and even more exciting, Melvin Manhoff is going to be back on the card, so watch out for that.
Boy, I hope it's not sadness when Melvin Manhoff fights.
I know. It's so flip a coin, though. But either way, someone's going to sleep.
Yeah, well, we've also seen some Manhoff fights, like Manhoff versus Carvalho, where I really wanted to go to sleep because it was that bad. Yeah,
that's such an exception. That's like the only decision on, like one of very few decisions on Melvin Manhoff's record.
Yeah, that is true. Before we go, we should shout out Ilima-Lei Macfarlane, the women's flyweight champion for Bellator. She did a really good job as a guest analyst while Chael was, of course, fighting Machida. She was a guest with Josh Thompson and Jay Glazer, and she was by far the most enjoyable part of that studio panel. I think Bellator should be pushing her more, because not only is she an outstanding fighter, and I've interviewed her in the past, she is a great personality.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I thought she killed it, and she kept it real. She's like, I don't like Dylan Dennis. I'm going to keep it $1 billion. And she was true to herself, and I respect the shit out of that. So, yeah, that was definitely cool. I think they still need some work, though, with their voice team. They have some gems, but they definitely have some cleaning up to do, I would say.
Oh, definitely. The production could use some improvement, and somebody got to get Mauro Ranallo a lozenge or something, because his voice was just gone from the opening prelim.
Yeah, I still love him, though. He's great. He tries. He gives his best effort, and I love that.
Certainly does.
I'm proud of Bellator. I'll say that about this card. I'm proud of Bellator for doing this, and I'm proud of Rizin for playing ball and being down. And it's risky. Like, putting your champ out there like that is not easy. So good on them for allowing, or good on Bellator for going out there first and then rising, playing ball and staying true to their word and sending their champ back out here for the rematch. I thought that's very stand-up-ish. So
yep, 100%.
I'm a happy camper.
Yep, and on that note, we're going to wrap this up. It's getting late. We hope you enjoyed listening to the 6th Round Post-Fight Show. You can find me on Twitter at Mookie Alexander, Eddie at the Eddie Mercado. And don't forget, we have Pull No Punches, Care Don't Care, the Mookie and Crookie Show, If I Did It, the MMA Vivisection, and the Level Change podcast. All of that is part of the Bloody Elbow Presents rotation. You can find us, of course, on the Bloody Elbow Presents YouTube channel, on the MMA-Nation, SoundCloud, and iTunes pages. And, of course, we're on pretty much every other place in the web that allows us to upload podcasts. Next week, 6th round will, of course, be for UFC Greenville, which is headlined by Renato Moicano and the Korean Zombie. That's going to be an awesome fight. On that note, again, thanks for listening. And from Eddie and myself, enjoy your weekend.